My sister violently attacked my innocent 10-year-old at her wedding ceremony because I said no to funding her dream day. She yanked my daughter's hair and threw her against a wall, causing blood and trauma, while my own family members actually took her side and said my child was being bratty and needed discipline. I'm still shaking as I write this. It's been 3 days since my sister Vanessa's wedding, and I can't get the images out of my head. My 10-year-old daughter Emma's terrified screams, the blood on her scalp, the way my own family turned their backs on us when we needed them most. I need to get this out. Maybe someone here will understand what I'm going through. Let me start from the beginning, because the more I think about it, the more I realize Saturday wasn't just one terrible moment. It was the culmination of years of my sister's manipulation and my family's willful blindness. Vanessa had been planning this wedding for 2 years. Not just any wedding, a lavish affair at the prestigious Patel Event Center in downtown Atlanta. This place is expensive. We're talking $50,000 minimum for a basic package, and Vanessa wanted everything. The crystal chandeliers, the imported flowers, the 7-course meal, the whole works. Here's what I didn't know until recently. Vanessa couldn't afford any of it. She'd been living paycheck to paycheck, maxing out credit cards, borrowing money from friends. But somehow, she convinced Raj Patel, the owner of the venue, to let her book the space with just a small deposit. I found out later from one of the staff members that this wasn't Raj's usual business practice. Vanessa had apparently spun him some sob story about our family's financial struggles after our dad's death 3 years ago, how this wedding would bring our grieving family together, how she just needed one chance to make everything perfect. Raj, being a decent human being, had agreed to a payment plan that was incredibly generous, maybe too generous. What Raj didn't know was that Vanessa had no intention of honoring that payment plan. Her strategy was simple: get everyone else to pay for her dream wedding. And her primary target? Me. For months leading up to the wedding, I'd been getting calls from my mom, my aunts, even distant cousins I'd barely talked to. The message was always the same. You know Vanessa's struggling financially. You're doing so well with your IT consulting business. Family helps family. The pressure was relentless. Every family gathering became an opportunity for them to remind me how blessed I was, how I owed it to the family to help out. They'd bring up how our parents had helped pay for my college, conveniently forgetting that I'd paid them back with interest. They'd mention how Vanessa had always been there for everyone, which was news to me, considering she'd borrowed money from me at least a dozen times over the years and never paid any of it back. My mom was the worst. She'd call me crying, talking about how important this wedding was for Vanessa's happiness, how I was the only one who could make it happen. She's your sister, she'd say. Don't you want her to be happy? The thing is, I didn't want Vanessa to be happy. I'd already contributed $3,000 toward the wedding expenses, money I could have put toward Emma's college fund or our mortgage. But apparently, that wasn't enough. They wanted more, much more. On the day I arrived at the venue around 10 a.m. with Emma, the place was already buzzing with activity. Florists arranging massive bouquets, caterers setting up tables, photographers testing their equipment. It should have been beautiful, but I felt this knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. Emma was excited though. She'd been looking forward to seeing her cousins and dancing at the reception. She'd picked out a special dress for the occasion, a simple blue sundress that made her look so grown up. She kept asking if she could help with anything, always eager to be useful. I found Vanessa in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids and my mom. She looked stunning, I have to admit. Her dress was this elaborate creation with hand-sewn beadwork and a train that seemed to go on forever. But there was something manic in her eyes, a frantic energy that made me uneasy. There he is, she announced when she saw me, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. My wonderful big brother. Come here, I need to talk to you. My mom immediately shooed the bridesmaids out of the room. That should have been my first warning sign. So, Vanessa said, her voice artificially bright, we have a tiny little problem with the catering. I waited, already knowing where this was going. They need the final payment today. Like, right now. It's $10,000, and if we don't pay, they're going to shut down the whole reception. I stared at her. $10,000? Today? Vanessa, you told me the catering was already paid for. Well, there were some additional costs. Extra guests, upgraded menu. You know how these things go. She waved her hand dismissively. But it's fine. You can just transfer it from Emma's college fund. You'll make that money back in no time with your business. The casualness of it took my breath away. She was talking about my daughter's future like it was pocket change, like it was money I owed her. I can't do that, I said quietly. That money is for Emma's education. It's not for a wedding. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mom stepped forward, her face already flushing with anger. You can't do that, she repeated, her voice rising. Your sister is getting married once in her life, and you can't help her? I already gave her $3,000, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I've been helping with expenses for months, but I won't touch Emma's college fund. Vanessa's mask slipped thin. The artificial sweetness vanished, replaced by something ugly and desperate. You are so fucking selfish, she snarled. You've always thought you were better than us. You sit there in your nice house with your successful business, looking down on the rest of us. That's not. It is, my mom jumped in. You act like you're so generous, but when your family really needs you, where are you? You'd rather let your sister's wedding be ruined than part with a little bit of money you won't even miss. I looked around the room, at the expensive dress, the professional makeup artists, the elaborate flower arrangements, and felt something snap inside me. A little bit of money I won't miss. I said, do you have any idea how long I've been saving for Emma's future? Do you know how many overtime hours, how many weekends I've worked to build that fund? And you want me to blow it all on one day? It's not just one day. Vanessa screamed. It's the most important day of my life. But you don't care about anyone but yourself and your precious daughter. The way she said precious daughter made my blood run cold. There was real venom in her voice, like Emma was somehow a rival rather than a 10-year-old child. That's when Emma appeared in the doorway. She'd been exploring the venue with some of the other kids, but she'd obviously heard the shouting. Her face was pale, and she looked scared. Daddy, she said in a small voice. Is everything okay? The sight of Emma seemed to send Vanessa into a complete rage. Maybe it was the stress of the wedding. Maybe it was the financial pressure, or maybe it was just years of resentment finally boiling over. But something in her just broke. This is all your fault, she shrieked, pointing at Emma. He cares more about you than his own family. Before I could react, Vanessa lunged forward and grabbed Emma by the hair. My daughter let out a piercing scream as Vanessa yanked her head back and slammed it against the wall. The sound of Emma's skull hitting the plaster will haunt me for the rest of my life. Vanessa, stop. I shouted, but she wasn't done. She dragged Emma toward the small stage area where the bridal party was supposed to take photos and literally threw her off it. Emma hit the floor hard, her dress tearing, blood already starting to mat her blonde hair. I've never moved so fast in my life. I scooped Emma up in my arms, feeling her small body shaking with sobs. Her scalp was bleeding where it had hit the wall, and she was clutching her side where she'd landed. She's fine, Vanessa kept saying, but her voice was shaking and her hands were trembling. She fell. Kids fall all the time. My mom, incredibly, was still taking Vanessa's side. Stop making such a big deal out of this, she hissed at me. You're going to ruin her wedding day. Emma's tough, she'll be fine. I stared at my mother in absolute disbelief. My daughter was bleeding and traumatized, and her grandmother was more worried about protecting her abuser than comforting her victim. That's when the doors to the bridal suite opened, and Raj Patel walked in. I'd met him briefly when I'd arrived, but I hadn't really paid attention to him. He was a tall, well-dressed man in his 50s with graying temples and kind eyes. The kind of person you'd expect to run a high-end venue, professional, discreet, used to handling wealthy clients' drama. But the moment he entered the room, Vanessa's entire demeanor changed. The manic rage disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like terror. Mr. Patel, she stammered, unconsciously smoothing down her dress. We were just. Raj's eyes took in the scene. Emma bleeding in my arms, the overturned furniture, Vanessa's disheveled appearance, my mother's defensive posture. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but something in his voice had gone very cold. Mrs. Morrison, he said quietly. What happened here? Nothing, Vanessa said quickly. Just a little accident. Kids, you know how they are. Always getting into trouble. Raj walked over to where Emma and I were standing. He knelt down to Emma's level, his voice gentle but concerned. Hello, sweetheart. Are you hurt? Emma nodded, tears still streaming down her face. My head hurts, she whispered. Raj stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's face. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. Mrs. Morrison, he said finally. I think we need to have a conversation about your continued use of this facility. What I learned later, from overhearing Raj's phone call to his attorney, was that this wasn't Vanessa's first incident at the venue. Apparently, during the planning process, she'd had screaming matches with multiple vendors, had threatened a florist who'd suggested changes to her color scheme, and had actually shoved a catering manager who told her that her guest count exceeded the venue's capacity. Raj had given her chance after chance because he believed her sob story about our family struggles. He'd restructured her payment plan twice, had waived several fees, and had personally intervened when vendors had threatened to quit. His generosity had been remarkable, and Vanessa had repaid it by turning his venue into a scene of child abuse. I want her out, he said into the phone, his voice carrying clearly across the room. Cancel the contract. Refund whatever deposits can be refunded to the vendors, but I want the Morrison party out of my venue within the hour. Vanessa went white. Mr. Patel, please. You can't do this. All my guests are here. My family. Your family, Raj said, turning to face her. Includes that little girl you just assaulted. And I will not have my venue associated with violence against children. Security will escort you out if necessary. You'd think that seeing a grown woman physically attack a 10-year-old child would be enough to wake up my family. You'd be wrong. My mom immediately went into damage control mode. Mr. Patel, I'm sure we can work this out. Vanessa is just stressed about the wedding. She didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. My Aunt Helen, who'd witnessed the whole thing, actually had the audacity to say, well, maybe if Emma hadn't been eavesdropping on adult conversations, none of this would have happened. My cousin Mark, Vanessa's groomsman, shook his head at me like I was being unreasonable. Come on, man. She's family. You can't let them kick her out on her wedding day. But the worst was my own mother. As Raj's security team began setting up to escort us out, she grabbed my arm and hissed in my ear, fix this. Pay the money and fix this, or I will never forgive you. I looked down at Emma, still bleeding, still trembling in my arms, and something inside me finally broke free. All those years of being guilt-tripped, manipulated, made to feel like I was the selfish one for having boundaries. It all crystallized in that moment. No, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm not fixing anything. Vanessa assaulted my daughter, and you're all acting like it's my fault for not funding her tantrum. Meanwhile, Vanessa's fiancé David had been getting ready in another part of the venue. He'd heard the commotion and come running, still in his wedding tuxedo, but missing his tie and jacket. When he saw Emma's condition, his face went completely white. David was a good guy, a teacher at the local elementary school who'd always been sweet with Emma during family gatherings. The sight of her injured and traumatized seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Jesus Christ, Vanessa. He breathed. What did you do? It was an accident, Vanessa insisted, but her voice was getting more desperate. She fell. I was trying to help her. David looked at the wall where Emma's blood was still visible, at the overturned furniture, at the obvious signs of violence. He wasn't stupid. You did this, he said, and it wasn't a question. You hurt a child. David, please, Vanessa begged. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The money problems, the family drama. I just snapped for a second. David stared at her for a long moment, and I could actually see the moment when his love for her died. It was written all over his face. The shock, the disgust, the realization that he'd been about to marry someone capable of violence against a child. He started pulling off his wedding ring before he'd even finished speaking. I can't do this, Vanessa. I can't marry someone who would hurt a kid. Any kid, but especially Emma. You can't leave me. Vanessa shrieked, but David was already walking away. David, you can't leave me at the altar. What about all the money? What about our future? He turned back, just once, his voice quiet but firm. There is no future. Not after this. And then he was gone, leaving Vanessa in her $5,000 wedding dress, surrounded by the ruins of her perfect day. While my family continued their attempts to guilt-trip and manipulate me into somehow salvaging the situation, I was already moving into protective father mode. The first priority was getting Emma proper medical attention and documenting everything for legal purposes. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I got clear footage of Emma's injuries, the blood on the wall where her head had hit, the overturned furniture that showed signs of the struggle. I made sure to capture Vanessa's disheveled state and manic behavior, as she continued to insist it had all been an accident. What are you doing? My mom demanded when she saw me filming. Protecting my daughter, I said simply, and making sure there's evidence of what really happened here. I also made note of the witnesses. Several venue staff members had seen the attack, as had a few family members who'd been honest enough to admit what they'd witnessed. I got their names and contact information. Then I called 911. My mom tried to stop me, actually grabbing for my phone, but I held her off. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a child abuse incident at the Patel Event Center on Peachtree Street. My sister just physically assaulted my 10-year-old daughter. The child has head injuries and needs medical attention. The response was immediate and professional. Paramedics and police were dispatched, with an estimated arrival time of 8 minutes. When the police arrived, they took the situation very seriously. The lead officer, Detective Rodriguez, was a middle-aged woman with teenagers of her own. She took one look at Emma's injuries and Vanessa's erratic behavior and immediately separated us for individual interviews. I showed her the video footage, explained the events leading up to the attack, and provided the list of witnesses. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Emma's injuries were consistent with being slammed against a wall and thrown from a height, not with any kind of accidental fall. Vanessa's story kept changing. First it was an accident, then Emma had fallen while Vanessa was trying to help her, then she claimed Emma had been acting up and needed to be disciplined. Each version contradicted the last, and her increasingly desperate attempts to avoid responsibility only made her look worse. The venue's security cameras had captured audio from the hallway outside the bridal suite, including Emma's screams and Vanessa's threats. Raj Patel provided the footage without hesitation, along with a statement about Vanessa's previous aggressive behavior toward his staff. Even as the police were taking statements and paramedics were treating Emma, my family continued to pressure me to drop the charges. She's your sister, my mom kept saying. You can't do this to family. Family doesn't attack children, I replied. My Aunt Helen tried a different approach. Think about what this will do to the family reputation. Do you want everyone to know we have these kinds of problems? I want everyone to know that I protect my daughter. Uncle Bob, always the family peacemaker, suggested we work it out privately. Maybe Vanessa could pay for Emma's medical bills, get some anger management counseling. No need to involve the courts. I looked at him incredulously. She assaulted a child. This isn't a family disagreement that can be solved over Sunday dinner. But the most appalling response came from my cousin Sarah, one of Vanessa's bridesmaids. Honestly, she said, Emma was being kind of bratty today. Maybe this will teach her some manners. I saw red. Literally saw red. If Detective Rodriguez hadn't been standing right there, I might have done something I'd regret. Get away from my daughter, I said through clenched teeth. All of you, you're not family anymore. Emma was taken to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for a full evaluation. She had a concussion, several abrasions on her scalp, and heavy bruising on her ribs where she'd hit the floor. Physically, she'd recover completely within a few weeks. Emotionally, that was going to take longer. The child psychologist who evaluated her was concerned about trauma responses. Emma had nightmares for weeks afterward, and she became very clingy and anxious around adults she didn't know well. We started therapy immediately, and she's been making progress, but it's been a long road. Vanessa was arrested and charged with cruelty to children in the second degree, a felony in Georgia. Her bail was set at $25,000, which my family somehow scraped together, probably by mortgaging someone's house. But the damage to her life was extensive. She lost her job when her employer learned about the charges. David obviously called off the engagement, and she had to move back in with our parents. The legal process took months. Vanessa's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but I refused to accept anything that didn't include jail time and mandatory anger management. Eventually, she pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. The wedding cancellation was a financial disaster for everyone involved. The venue kept their deposits, the caterers charged cancellation fees, and most of the vendors demanded payment for services already rendered. The total loss was probably close to $40,000. My family, of course, blamed me for all of it. If I'd just paid the catering bill, none of this would have happened, they said. If I'd been more understanding of Vanessa's stress, she wouldn't have snapped. The irony is that I would have been on the hook for much of those costs anyway if I'd given in to their demands. The $10,000 they'd wanted was just the beginning. Once I'd opened that door, there would have been more emergencies, more last-minute expenses, more family obligations that somehow always fell on my shoulders. In the months that followed, the extent of my family's dysfunction became even clearer. They circled the wagons around Vanessa, treating her like the victim of my overreaction. They started a narrative where I was the villain who destroyed the family over money, conveniently ignoring the fact that their victim had put a child in the hospital. My mother tried to guilt me into visiting Vanessa in prison. She's learned her lesson, she insisted. She needs family support to get through this. When I refused, she escalated to emotional blackmail. Your father would be ashamed of you, she said during our last phone conversation. He raised you to take care of family, not abandon them when they need you most. That was the final straw. I told her that Dad would have been ashamed of a family that protected child abusers and blamed victims. Then I hung up and blocked her number. I did the same with the aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd spent months harassing me to forgive and forget. Some of them tried to use Emma as leverage, saying how much they missed her and wanted to be part of her life. But I wasn't about to expose my daughter to people who'd already shown they'd sacrifice her well-being for family harmony. It's been 8 months now since the wedding that wasn't. Emma is doing much better. The nightmares have stopped, and she's back to her normal, happy, curious self. We still do therapy, but more as a precaution than a necessity. I've built a new chosen family for us. Emma's teacher became a close family friend after learning about what happened and offering support. My neighbor, a retired grandmother whose own family lives across the country, has become like a surrogate grandmother to Emma. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during the years I was constantly managing my family's crises. The college fund that my family wanted me to raid for a wedding is now bigger than ever. I've been putting the money I used to spend on family emergencies into Emma's future instead. She's already talking about wanting to study marine biology, and I love knowing that she'll have the resources to pursue whatever dream she develops. Looking back, I can see that the wedding was just the final explosion of years of accumulated dysfunction. Vanessa had always been the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the reliable one who was expected to clean up everyone else's messes. The family had trained me to prioritize their feelings over my own boundaries, their needs over my daughter's welfare. The attack on Emma was horrible, but in a twisted way, it was also clarifying. It stripped away all the pretty lies and manipulative rhetoric and showed me exactly what my family thought of my daughter and me. We were resources to be used, not people to be loved and protected. I've learned that blood relation doesn't automatically make someone family. Real family are the people who support you when you're doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice your child's future for their wants. Real family doesn't blame a 10-year-old for being assaulted. Emma and I are better off without them. It took a wedding day nightmare to show me that, but I'm grateful I finally saw the truth. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd given in that day. If I transferred the $10,000, paid for the wedding, kept the peace. Vanessa would probably still be escalating her demands. My family would still be treating me like an ATM, and Emma would have learned that her father's love had a price tag. Instead, she learned that her father will protect her no matter what it costs. That's a lesson worth any amount of family drama. I don't regret the choice I made. I'd make it again in a heartbeat. My daughter is worth more than all their approval combined. Update: some people have asked about Vanessa's sentence and whether I think it was fair. Honestly, I think she got off easy. 2 years for assaulting a child seems light to me, but the prosecutor explained that first-time offenders rarely get more than that for this type of charge. What matters more to me is that Emma knows justice was served. She knows that what happened to her was wrong, that the adult who hurt her faced consequences, and that her father fought to protect her. Those lessons are worth more than any amount of jail time. Update 2. A few people have suggested that I should reconcile with my family for Emma's sake. Let me be clear, I am doing this for Emma's sake. I'm protecting her from people who have already shown they will sacrifice her well-being for their own convenience. That's not trauma I want to inflict on her twice. The day they chose to defend her attacker over supporting her recovery was the day they forfeited any right to be in her life. That's not negotiable.